My name's Tim. I'm a musician, a car collector, an automotive journalist, and a lover of all things automotive. I've bought and sold collectible cars for 2 decades, and I hope my experiences and my point of view helps you find the car of your dreams. And as far as dream cars go, look at this Aston Martin DB2, and I'm driving it. Pinch me. A few weeks ago, I found out that some of the cars from the Don Marsh collection were going to be auctioned off. A friend of mine reached out and asked if I could take some pictures and maybe shoot some video of some cars. He gave me the list of cars, and 2 of the cars that I loved as a kid and really honestly thought I would never even get a chance to drive were on the list. Imagine me getting to drive and compare an Allard J2 with an Aston Martin DB2, sports cars from the very dawn of the sports car era. They're glorious. They were beautifully maintained by a mechanic named Steve Kranz, and I'll tell you a little bit more about him in a minute. What a day. These cars come from a stunning collection put together by a gentleman named Don Marsh. Don Marsh started numerous dealerships. In fact, one of the biggest dealerships in the area. It used to be called MidVo. It's like the largest in the Midwest. They have every brand of car. Most of those brands were represented, and he had the very finest pieces of the cars that were the very genesis of these brands. And today, 2 of those cars are the cars that we're going to look at. We're going to compare their performance to each other, even though one is raucous and one is highly developed and smooth. They both have race victories, and they both sort of represent the pinnacle of engineering at the time. Sadly, Don passed about 1.5 years ago, but some of the cars remain in a trust, and before they get auctioned off, we're gonna get a chance to sample these cars. What comes across in this collection is a rare relationship. The relationship between visionary, in this case, Don Marsh, and Steve Kranz, his beloved mechanic and friend over the decades. You can really feel the care, craftsmanship, and quality that's imbued by that relationship. During his lifetime, Don Marsh was able to build a collection of bikes, cars, everything, multi-generational, and Steve kept everything in tip-top shape and is honestly a genius savant of a mechanic. The engine in this Allard isn't just a regular Cadillac, it's one that's been breathed on by Steve, and the same goes for the Vantage Inline 6 in the DB2. These cars are sort of set apart by a caretaker, someone whose job it was to keep these cars perfect. Whether it was a Porsche or a Ferrari, Allard, Aston Martin, or a Honda sport bike, Steve spent decades honing his craft and turned these cars into the absolute pinnacle of what they could be. One thing you've heard me say before in Tim's Enthusiast Garage is that collecting across the generations makes a much more interesting garage. A garage that contains Vice-era cars, 60s cars, 30s cars, 50s cars. Honestly, I got a chance to be in this Cord earlier today with its supercharged front-wheel drive engine. Blew my mind. And that's something that I really would never have even thought of, because to some extent, I think we're closed-minded and our imaginations are captured by the cars of our youth. I was fortunate in that when I was a young kid, my best friend gave me a book. It was called The Great Book of Sports Cars, and it made me a much more sophisticated connoisseur of automobiles. You know, I learned about the Allard J2 from a very early age. I fell in love with the Renault Alpine and cars like the DB2. I fell in love with the J2. A J2 just like this one finished third at Le Mans. And if the idea of technology from the late 40s, a curb weight of around 2,000 pounds and 400 foot-pounds of torque don't put the fear of God in you, it should. Don Marsh put together a spectacular collection. From this XK120 to the Allard J2 to the DB2 that we're gonna drive right now. So I'm about to drive one of my boyhood dream cars, the Aston Martin DB2 with the Vantage inline 6. Does it get any better than this? We're about to find out. Oh, music, music! So we found a brick street, and the brick street is very Euro, but does highlight the lack of general rigidity of cars from this era. And I cannot stress enough, people always talk about new cars and manual transmissions, about how it's just something great when you really snatch a gear. These older cars, this is where it counts. This is where, when you get a gear change perfect on a car from this era, that's what you're talking. That's what it's about. By the 2000s, or even really the 80s or 90s, gearboxes were all synchronized. You'd have to be pretty incapable to not get shifts right on, say, a 911 from the 80s. Now, that being said, there's a little bit of a difference between a good shift and a great shift. But this car, when you hammer home a gear just right, or when you downshift and your rev match is just perfect, it's on another plane. I've driven the car about 30 feet, and you can tell a lot about a car in 30 feet, and already I can tell you that the things that I was concerned, and there goes the Allard. The things that I were concerned about are definitely non-issues in this car. The steering actually feels great. The clutch feels great. The engine is tuned to perfection. And other than some ergonomic woes, with me being 6'2", oh, she shifts beautifully, match those revs, and she sinks right up. Honestly, it's beautiful. It's not dissimilar from an XK120. If you've driven an XK120, or really even an E-Type, you know, the lineage, the sort of British historic car is there. This wood rim steering wheel is absolutely perfect. I mean, as you can see, all the gauges, and even this beautiful dainty mirror, which is in and of itself just fantastic. You know, it is everything you would think it would be. It's very cool stuff. You can even have a smoke if you dare. The Allard, I can already tell, though I have not driven it yet, is a different motoring experience. This is a gentleman's car. But the noise is fantastic. Even at 3,500 revs. The Vantage engine in this car basically is a higher compression version of the inline 6. And what I'd say about that is, while the power output for its day wasn't super spectacular, and by today's standards is woefully inadequate, the car feels pretty quick. I mean, it feels definitely vivacious and enjoyable. Finishing my time in the DB2 was a bit anticlimactic. If there's one car I've driven in the last 15 years that I would love to have in my collection, it's this DB2. The connection to the origins of motoring as I know it start right here with cars like this. Already a little bit tired from driving the DB. As I said, real men from the 50s were true heroes that drove these cars. I almost shudder to think the workout, the clutch weighs about 6 million pounds. So this is gonna be a real treat and an experience. already tell you, if you've watched my videos, typically there's some opposite lock. There is not going to be any opposite lock in this one, because you've seen videos of the gentlemen that drove these cars, the race car drivers in the era driving these cars, sawing vigorously at the wheel. Well, let me tell you, I totally understand why. Because the amount of sawing on the wheel to keep this bad boy straight that would be required, there are no double wishbones here. Far from it. It looks like a Didion and a giant metal bar up front. And the direction of the car is dictated, I can tell you already, primarily by the amount of throttle input you elect to distribute, which will not be a lot in the early stages here. We're off. I cannot imagine driving this car for 12 hours at Sebring. Oh my gosh. The upper body workout would be fearsome. Let there be no doubt that you are vividly aware of the fact that you are alive driving this car, and that if you don't make the right decision, you shan't be alive. The closest thing I can compare it to at half throttle is a Shelby Cobra with a wildly unset up suspension, whereas the Shelby Cobra is fairly nuanced and sort of newfangled in its AC sort of setup. This car, boy oh boy, it makes you work for it. The friend of the owner who owned this car said this car has a real temperament, has a mean streak. I understand what he meant very vividly. It just wants to go. And it's all you can do to sort of rein it in and keep it on the straight and narrow. What a thing. With me, and what Cole doesn't know is that in the throttle travel of about 12 inches, I'm using about 4. This car has modern performance, but a very vintage chassis. What a riot this would be on a road rally. An absolute riot. Drove by a small child. That small child is now a car fan. If he wasn't before, he now wants the petrol. You can sort of imagine a titan like Carroll Shelby vigorously wheeling this car to a victory. Don't need any revs, any gear, the torque is there. Amazing. Steering is akin to sort of if something else I've driven, I would say like a 60s Mercedes sedan, to sort of put that into perspective for you. It's definitely not precise in a modern sense.
I can't even begin to express how thankful I am I had the opportunity to connect with one of the original Allard chassis J2s. The Cadillac V8 in this thing is as mental as you would think it would be. The car is completely mad and defines high performance of the era. For me, the takeaway is the Aston Martin DB2. David Brown, Colin Chapman, Enzo Ferrari, they defined revolutionary, cutting-edge, graceful sports cars. And I think this car is one of, if not sort of the paragon of perfect drop head cars from this time. You know, early 50s cars that sort of defined what it was to be a sports car. I love it. I love the clamshell front end. I like the looks. I like that it's not quite as resolved as the DB5, and I think it really says something about the owner. You know, both of these cars do. And someone's gonna get a chance to put one or both of these cars in their garage. And honestly, what an amazing two-car garage that would be.